Welcome to MOTS, where we'll be applying the Manzer or mostly Thurlow scale of quantitative analysis of pop culture narrative through a binary system.
Or MOTS! This podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion advised. Good evening, and welcome back to Bon Mots. I'm Jonathan Manzer, and it's such a beautiful day. I'm here with Stephen Rossi.
I think I'll go for a walk.
And the storm clouds on the horizon, Scott Thurlow.
And I also will go for that same walk around the same block.
And today we are reviewing a slightly older, but still within the 2010s, series of short films by Don Hertzfeldt, entitled It's Such a Beautiful Day. It is a compilation of 3 short films following the same character.
And the same narrative, loosely, if you will.
I mean, each can be, well, at least the first can, which I saw independently back when it was originally
released. They can stand alone, sure. But they're supposed to be, I think they're meant to be taken together as a whole.
So the first is entitled Everything Will Be Okay. The second, I'm So Proud of You. And the third is the eponymous phrase, It's Such a Beautiful Day. So, Scott, would you like to give the, as per tradition, funny log line?
Yes, I'll certainly try. Try to condense it. It is a deranged/demented exploration of existential/metaphysical absurdity, I suppose.
That is absolutely true. And covered themes already. So,
kind of.
To give an actual synopsis, you're following, it's an animated film for a large majority of it, although towards the end it starts to blend into reality quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Following a character named Bill as he suffers through some kind of brain disease.
All right, I was going to say in my logline, I was going to maybe try to insert like an analogy to Alzheimer's, kind of, but it isn't quite that.
I think it's supposed
but it's a lot
to be
like
brain cancer.
Okay.
Based on the fact that, like, at one point he says he starts to grow his hair back.
Oh, true, yeah.
So
you're right, they did drop
that
in.
That's really the only part
Yeah,
that
they do mention that
it.
a family member of his supposedly had a tumor in her head at like his grandmother. So it follows.
You're right about
like,
that. Sure.
And then I suppose he has a stroke at the end of the
something
film,
like
or
it.
something similar. But it's kind of a you're really seeing the world from his point of view. So he's not even sure what's going on aside from that reality.
Well, it becomes
away.
less and less connected to reality, if whatever degree it was to begin with.
So since this is 3 short movies in one film, I felt it would be very fair to assess them as the intro, body, conclusion would be the
sure.
each of the 3 films.
At the end of the day, that is fair.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much.
So, Scott, would you like to discuss Everything is Going to Be Okay?
Sure. So it starts off. So if you're not familiar with Hertzfeldt's style, first of all, it's almost like stick figure-ish animation, but like I said, sort of demented sometimes. I know he's in an earlier film that's rather famous, or it was sort of like a cult classic in college, and we all watched it. But yeah, so it starts off like...
that's titled Rejected, by the way, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, so check out that if nothing else. But so like, if you're familiar with it, it's easily recognizable. It's a stick figure guy in a hat, essentially, going through his daily life, and like, he's normal-ish. It's I believe it's narrated by Don himself. I think it's him.
I'm not sure.
It's definitely narrated. So it's like Bill woke up and went to work. On the way to work, he ran into a person he knew, but they were... Again, it points out like all these like very death of a thousand absurdities, I guess I want to say.
Yeah.
It's something like he's passed a guy that he recognized but wasn't sure what to say. And when he got close, he said a combination of what's up and how's it going? How's up? The guy said thanks. And they continued on awkwardly, half looking back at each other, but certain in the fact that they'll never see each other again. Like, it's all like things like that. So it sort of like sets you up, like you said, you're viewing this whole film. It's, how shall I describe it? Not traditional animation. It's almost like one frame, one like almost ripped out piece of paper is Bill is on, and then like there's blankness, there's like just blackness, and then a different frame is like showing something else that's going on, or something that's happening in his head, or like whatever he's feeling about the actual situation that's in quote unquote reality happening to him.
Yeah, or there's often like an image behind the the background is
something
like another
bizarre.
Image, or it's just something that's
something else is playing, or like like you said, not only at the end, but yes, more at the end, more towards the third part of it, the third act, but even interspersed is like shots of like actual trees or like a bench in a park, and then the animation like plays over it or is overlaid or switches back to it and so forth.
What I really like is that it's a blending of 2 styles of comedy. The first is kind of almost trivial, observational humor,
Yes.
like you get from like Jerry Seinfeld or
Sure.
something like that, and then heavy absurd humor.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Black
really-
comedy is
yeah,
Very
definitely
dark,
weaves in and
often.
out.
but it's also playing, like, for instance, we'll get to that, the scene with the guy blowing leaves in a
Yes.
bit, but it's kind of the interplay of really that black humor of absurdity. Basically, the standard joke would be just a trivial observation, but then he puts that black humor on top of
Right.
it.
There's an extra
Absurd-
layer
yeah.
beyond
So-
just that, for sure.
It works really well for me.
I agree. Like, I guess I would say, like, I'm sort of getting off on a tangent, but it sort of takes a certain type of person to, get a lot of this and appreciate it. But to answer the introduction question, it's Bill going through his daily life, and then you get more details. So, like, he's going in, like, he has to go to hospital for checkups and check on his condition. And you get, like, little hints of he forgets things here and there. He's not sure about who he's talking to sometimes. But for the most part, he's pretty stable.
Right.
So, like, yes, I'm going to say it's a good introduction. I just want to point out, this may go to dialogue, but there was one little scene that I really liked. Again, sort of like the dark humor / absurdity / observational comedy, where he wonders how much time of his life he's wasted, like turning the lights off or cleaning the counter or whatever. And then the narration says, but then he realized that was his life, and everything else that was unusual was like the other things that were beyond it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a good setup. It's sort of like, again, it's not difficult to get into, I would say, but you have to sort of be ready for it.
I think that Everything Will Be Okay is the strongest of all three films, and I think the most standalone-ish. And
It's
again,
definitely the
I
most
saw that
standalone,
first.
I guess I would say.
And this is my, I think, third time seeing this film.
Mm-hmm.
It takes on a darker tone when you know what's going to happen and what he's suffering
I could see
through.
that. Fair enough.
And all those trivialities and all the points of referencing how much of his time he's wasted. The fact that he knows he's facing his death and you don't know he knows it until much later.
Sure, that's a good point. Maybe like retroactively is more impactful.
I think the strongest part is his interaction with his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah, with her
Ex-girlfriend, in fact. They make a point of mentioning that every single time.
But the point is, like, she cares about him, but he's dying, and you get the sense that they left when like it was known to be fatal.
Yes, that's true. They
Right.
definitely like have a little scene
And
about
that she
that.
still cares about him, and like that thing where they're walking together, and he gets close, and she just kind of like
Tight-lipped and moves
tight-lipped
away.
and moves away. But like that idea of wanting to be there for him, but not wanting to get emotionally attached, I think is a very strong and like heartbreaking,
No, it's
especially
definitely
upon
impactful, yeah.
reviews.
Definitely impactful. So I'll definitely give it a very strong one. It was a good lead-in, and again, even though it may take like you might not be ready for what you're in for, but once you start sort of getting into it, it becomes quite a good ride.
Yeah, I agree. It's absolutely a really good intro. I mean, even if you just watch this one, or even if this is the first thing by Hertzfeldt that you're seeing, it's a good introduction to him. It's got a stronger or a more glued together narrative than the other two sections.
I think that's well said.
Just because he is more in his right mind in this one. As the film goes on, we'll talk about it.
It reflects the breakdown of him.
It starts to break apart more, and you don't really know what's going on a lot. But this one is a really good start, and it goes through once you actually learn about his issues, like his problems with his brain. It kind of made me think back to all the things that had happened earlier, like you were saying, and those became. You have to look at them in a different light.
Yeah, to take on, if not a different meaning, more layers, I suppose.
Right. So yeah, I'll give it a 1 as well.
I would definitely give it as 1 as well. I feel that overall this is the most mature of Hertzfeldt works I've seen. I mean, I love Rejected, but this has the absurdity, but with a very strong drama backbone to it, and the comedy to keep you laughing uncomfortably at times.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But now we're on to I'm So Proud of You, which is the second section of this film, which kind of deals with the history of Bill. You both find out a little bit about his past and some of the tragedies, and not only that, but his family history as well. Now, again, this is very interesting because when you reach the third section, you realize how all the absurdity that you're watching here is half-truths.
Right.
Is that his mind collapsing.
All the things that you find out about his family in the past, like 4 people in his past were run over by trains.
Yeah,
and
the validity of all that is thrown into question, of course.
his great uncle or something was a madman that lived in the woods for 50 years. Like
I mean,
all that
who
stuff.
doesn't have a great uncle who's a madman in the woods?
All that stuff is things that his brain is, or it's you're led to believe
maybe
that all that stuff is things
some
that
of
his
it
brain
might
have
be
filled
true,
in.
but you can't be sure at this point, or like retroactively it becomes a lot less clear.
Right.
Yeah, so the absurdity really starts kicking up in this section.
Yeah.
And I think one of the more tragic parts is the death of his mother, who came to take care of him, and you find out how you understand that she's kind of a broken woman to begin with.
Yeah.
But now you get to see a little bit of why, which may not, again, the facts are blurred with the fiction created in the mind,
Right.
but it is,
Even if some of it's
no,
true, then you can see like the origins.
yeah, this is all impressions that you
Yes.
get, which may not be, but you still get a sense of what's real and the real traumas that lie beneath.
I think you're meant to understand that there is definitely mental illness that runs in his family, regardless of
In some
if
form,
all the
yes.
things that he, if all the absurd things that you're told about his family are true.
Yeah, even if that's
Which is-
surfacey true, there's something there.
Which is funny too, because you're meant to be seeing this all from his point of view, and it's a narrator, and these aren't things that he's telling you about his past. Even though it is a narrator, they're all from his point of view, and they're all subject to be, incorrect.
Sure.
In a sense, you're listening to his inner monologue, discuss it in third person.
Right.
Which again, this movie is very difficult to piece together because there's so much takes on greater meaning later on in this work. So if you're just watching this, if you just see this one movie on its own or a short film,
Yeah, it won't have as much. Again,
it'll seem just really strange. Like Rejected initially was,
Yeah.
but all put together it works really well. And so basically, for the whole premise is at the end of the first chapter, Bill has a recovery, and then he starts to deteriorate again.
Right.
And you're getting flashes of his life throughout. So I really liked it. I think this was the weakest
I was going
section,
to say exactly that.
but
but
I
it's
think
not-
because of
yeah.
the other two,
Exactly.
it holds. These keep it afloat. So I'm going to give it a 1 for that.
I am too, just not as strong as a 1, but like certainly, yeah, it's sort of a bad connotation. Like, yeah, it's the weakest one just because it has to sit in the middle of the other two. So just via that fact, but it's still perfectly fine, and it gives you like again information that you might need as an audience, even though then you, as you said, then later you might question that information because of the third act.
Yeah, exactly. It fills in a lot of Bill's story, even though it fills in a lot of Bill's story, and it fills in a lot of information about the state of his mind at the time. No, I'm going to give it a 1 as well.
Yep.
All right. Well, it's on to you with
And-
the conclusion. It's such a beautiful day.
It is such a beautiful day. This is kind of towards the end, where I believe right in the beginning of this one, his doctor tells him he doesn't have long to live. At the end, is it the end of the second one or the beginning of is it at the end of I'm So Proud of You, or at the beginning of It's Such a Beautiful Day, where he has the stroke or whatever? He has like a massive issue.
I think it's at the very
I think
end
it's-
of
yeah,
the
just at the tail
second
end.
one. But
It's right.
The
But don't-
repercussions come along.
Don't
Right.
quote me on it, but I think that's accurate.
It's basically it's right when he feels the best that he's felt in a long time. Out of nowhere,
Yeah.
he gets this, whatever it is, stroke or whatever happens, and he just collapses on the street. And when he wakes up, he's in the hospital again. He doesn't really know where he is, and so I believe that's the start of the third one, where there's just a lot of things going on, and the narrator is talking about how he doesn't really know what's going on, and he doesn't really know where he is. He assumes that he's just always lived there at the hospital. So you can tell things are in a downward spiral
Yeah, I was gonna say,
for Bill.
He's losing his grasp more and more.
And this goes into a lot of his state of mind, what's going on. They talk a lot about how his girlfriend visits him, or his ex-girlfriend visits him at one point with her current boyfriend.
Yeah.
Again, what I love about this is you don't even know how much time has passed.
Yeah.
And he doesn't either. They
Yeah,
really do
they
a great
actually-
job
They
of,
outright say that, I believe, as well as a line. There's in the narration, that is.
of demonstrating to you what it would be like to
Right.
go through something like this.
Yeah, and that's I think that's the best and most beautiful part of this film, is that it
Captures
really captures. I mean, I don't know. I've never had brain issues. as far as I know.
Are you sure?
At least not the ones
I just said as far as I
portrayed
know.
in this film.
But I mean, I don't know what it's actually like, but it seems like this. If you saw the world in the way that is described, you would act in the way that Bill is acting. Which would seem incredibly strange to an outside person,
Sure.
But in your own mind, it's perfectly reasonable, and that's kind of what it's explaining and how it's going through that. And I still love throughout all three parts of this, there's discussion of these really mundane details that become really important to Bill, throughout, that are kind of just things that he has always missed, I guess, or like has never noticed before. It talks at one point in this section about the stars and like how their light has been coming from across the galaxy, and he just wanted to stop and tell everybody on the street to look up. And there's one section in here where he gets sent home for a few days to wait on his diagnosis, and he ends up just kind of walking around the block a bunch of times because he doesn't realize that he's already, I think it starts off like, it's kind of a really nice day out. I think I'll take a walk. And then he walks around the block and he gets back to the beginning and he just goes, it's kind of a really nice day out. He gets stuck in these patterns.
If I may interject for a moment, my favorite part of this is when he falls to the bathroom floor to his bath mat and telling you how much he has the most beautiful bath mat.
The bath mat is beautiful,
yes.
Yeah. But yeah.
Sure, it focuses on like mundane, like what should be mundane details, but to him become like sort of amazing, I think, as the narration says itself. Right,
exactly. But I think that an important part of this is the getting caught in these loops, things like that.
I think there's a montage where he keeps putting his keys down.
Yeah, and he keeps buying groceries, stuff like that. And I know people, in my own life that have gotten into the same type of mindsets and brain spaces, sure. And have gotten caught in loops like that. And it's really sad to watch, but at the same time, there's still so many things that people like that. Like when you're in a headspace like that, you're still noticing all these things. Like I think the movie does a really good job pointing that out.
Sure, no, I agree.
And then towards the end, he just kind of goes off on his own. He goes and finds his long lost father at some point because his uncle maybe directs him there.
I believe he's not aware of it's his uncle, but I think it's the uncle.
Right. And he doesn't, he goes and sees his father. They don't really recognize each other. They don't know why each other are there, but they end up watching TV together. And then he kind of goes off and
it's sort of a mirror between them.
Yeah, exactly. And then he goes off and lays down in the woods and presumably just dies there.
Has a weird death dream, though.
At the very end, yeah, it's him just going off through all of the rest of time, like, I guess having this dream about what his life is going to be, willing himself not to die even as he is dying. And it's kind of...
it gets pretty metaphysical,
yeah,
but it sort of makes sense still.
It's a great commentary, and it doesn't... I want to say it doesn't hit you over the head with it. It does to an extent, though. But it's not...
No, but not
it's
in the
not
sense
in
that
an annoying way, or it's not like
yeah.
in a, obnoxious way. It's just, like, here's something to think about, like...
Well, I think where its strength is, you're not an observer of Bill in a way, of a neutral observer seeing him deteriorate. You're experiencing it with him.
Right.
So
sure, yeah, that's kind of the brilliant of the, yeah. And maybe we'll talk a style about it, but definitely.
But that's why it works, because you're with him on his journey to the bitter end. Yeah. And like that's like if it was just kind of a neutral observer, if you were following the uncle or something like that, then it would have been hitting you over the head with these themes. But because you're following him, because you get the visual style of animation allowing you to see this kind of really screwed up world, yeah. And the effects of it, and how people's like faces start blending all into one, which is also a joke on his artistic style as well. But this is I think as close as you get to experiencing the deterioration of the brain without actually having it happen.
Possibly, to you. Yes. It's just it's subtly and deftly pulled off, I want to say.
Yeah.
So I
agree.
Can't say much more about it, but I'll definitely give it a 1.
Yep.
I'll give it a 1 as well.
Yep, me too.
All right, Scott. We've already discussed a little bit, but themes are on to you.
Yeah, so there's, as in the vein of our sort of theory of interweaving things, so it's not like, there's no one overriding theme, I would say. There's a bunch of like, maybe 5 or 6, I had to parse them out, but all woven together, like in and out throughout the whole narrative.
I would agree.
So it's sort of like the nature of life, etc. Commentary on modernity, just like living in the city, having a job, but also, of course, dealing with a sickness that at points it's impossible for other people to understand it because of the nature of it and how that affects both you and those around you. It's difficult to explain, like losing your memory, forgetting. I think there's a point where the doctors are asking him to describe a bunch of they're showing him pictures of things, and he's like, the narrator's like, Bill could describe many of these objects, but not all of them, right? But it's not sure which ones are which, etc.
So and you see pictures of them, and they're just ridiculous things,
and they're asking him to do math questions, and visually, it's all just blurred together, it's nonsense words and numbers together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's all a weird metaphysical existential examination filtered through this one light of this one character who is afflicted by a certain illness. So I think it speaks to a lot of things. Even if you don't know anyone who's had to go through something like it, you can sort of appreciate it for what it's saying to you about the exploration of life, I guess, and death as well.
In a way, you're dealing with someone who is aware they're going to die. So there's a lot of exploration of, you could go to the metaphysics example.
Well,
they're talking about the timeline.
If I may interrupt real quick, sometimes he's aware of it, but sometimes because of the nature of it, he's not. So that becomes an interesting dynamic.
That idea of they're doing the linear line of a time and saying everything has happened already and everything will happen, and then he in his own life he's stuck in circles of repeating the same task.
Yeah, sure. It's sort of an ironic echo to that.
But that's the thing is I think that it's in a sense exploring a lot of issues but
absolutely
not really. It's almost like how I guess if you were back in the Middle Ages, you would muse about God or what is the point of it all. It's taking that kind of musing of death in the light of kind of philosophy and science.
Mm-hmm.
And also about how it affects every single other person in your life. How the ex-girlfriend, the uncle, all these characters have realistic, it's, you feel it's unfair to Bill because you're following Bill. But I feel that they all react how, his mother basically almost dies because of this. So the stress, this is just another level of stress added onto her life, and that she will basically sacrifices herself for things. So there's so many, and I think ultimately though, the main theme is right in the title. It's the idea that you don't really appreciate the beauty of life until you're about to lose it.
Yeah, I guess that's the most obvious one, but I just want to point one more I just thought of that I thought, sort of now thinking about it, might be more impactful. So in the second part, he goes through again, whether whatever truthfulness of his history or not, you could take some kernel of truth that it's something, this illness is genetic to him. Mm. And then there's another an absurd encounter where he's at work and one of his coworkers is telling about twins who were separated at birth and each became serial killers, and he's like, genetics is a bitch or something like that. It's sort of a random offhanded joke that's thrown in there, but like you said, once you think about it, retroactively applying it, it sort of maybe is another nice little extra theme in there.
This is one of the most introspective movies I've seen in a very long time. It makes you think not only about the themes it's presenting, but about, I constantly question my own life through this, and if my reactions, and am I too swallowed up in the world and not appreciating everything?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's very strong on themes.
Yeah, I guess I'll say it juggles a lot of themes and it handles them all very well. And again, a lot of this may be not the greatest connotation, heavy themes, I guess, but not in that sense normally. Just things that maybe are more important than most people think about, and it handles them all quite well via the light of this character and his experience.
Absolutely. I think that you guys took the
Got anything else?
three things that I had written down and already have discussed them. So, I mean, really, the finding beauty in life through the lens of death is, I think, a really important thing, and maybe my most important takeaway from this film. Just the beauty in the mundanity of life and the mundaneness in your everyday things that you do that maybe are pointless or maybe are super important,
So I think the message here is stop listening to this podcast and go out and run in the field.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give them all a 1 for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1.
Okay, I'm on to antagonist here. Now, I'm probably going to give this a 0 because we kind of set a precedence on how we analyze antagonists in the story. And
you
you
guys
can
did
say
speak for
that
yourself.
you could say that mental illness or whatever, the cancer, is the antagonist here, or it's modern society, or it's
Existentialism.
existentialism and death. I mean, those are all things, but this is a tragedy without a villain.
Right.
It is not something that, I guess he's antagonized throughout his entire time by the fate of the death that's before him. But I don't know. Does anyone else have any?
I don't think he views it in that way, and I don't think it ever becomes an antagonist for him.
See, I knew you guys would say that, and it's not that I disagree with that. It's just that, you know me, I normally would say something like, the random misfortune would be the antagonist. But in this case, I may go to your guys' side of the fence and say that, there's nothing like outright antagonizing him.
In fact, I think the entire film is about,
aside from something abstract, of course, yes,
is about overlooking that thing that's
fact
trying to antagonize you, and like,
you know what, I think
getting past it, and like that.
That's well said.
Making it making it less of a hurdle, and
that's well said. And like, I know it's gonna bring down the score, but in that sense, I think I will agree with you guys and say there isn't really an antagonist per se. So I think you convinced me.
0s across the board.
0s all around.
Again, I don't think this is necessarily a detriment to the
it's not a mark
story,
against it,
no,
sure.
but it is the system we have set up. So, Stephen Amosi, who's the protagonist?
Bill is our protagonist in this film. He is a really well-rounded character. You learn pretty much everything you need to know about him through his very absurd observations, secondhand, from the narrator,
that's what I was gonna say,
through his absurd observations about the world and how he views things and what's going on with him. He has this really detached demeanor, somewhat similar to the protagonist in The Stranger. I can't remember his name.
Marcel.
Yeah. Marcel. But he kind of feels like that to me, where it's like he sees all these things happening, and he sees all these things in the world, and he reflects on them, and he sees beauty in them, but he doesn't seem to they don't seem to affect his demeanor in any way.
Actually, if I may say, that connection to The Stranger is very good, because if memory serves me correctly, Marcel has a similar reaction when he's sentenced to death at the end of the...
Kind of,
he rejects God at the end, but it's a sense that almost the first time embracing life, when he is about to be denied it.
Right.
And I feel that Bill goes through a similar path.
I can definitely see that parallel, and I will say just one more thing. It's pretty telling of the quality of this film is that Bill is a much more fleshed out character, again, stickman cartoon form than like films like with actual people, I would say.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that goes to show you that it's not about the person playing the role. It's about the character.
About the writing of the story.
It's about the character behind that person.
But
I definitely agree.
But it's also the narrator to the presentation he gives fleshes out Bill. With a worse narrator, Bill wouldn't have had
I agree.
a similar personality.
You're right. They sort of like go hand in hand. But because they were done to such a quality level, it elevates it, and I'll give it a strong 1. Both Bill and then the narration that holds it together.
Yeah, I'll give that a 1.
Yep. Same here. And Scott, onto supporting characters with you.
All right, so this one's kind of odd. There are many, I guess, but again, because of the nature of it, so you can say like when his mother shows up, and then his uncle, then he forgets, and his ex-girlfriend, they're all like actually well-rounded enough. I guess they fill out his world, I guess I want to say. And even like the people who meet in the streets, random coworker, the guy at the bus stop, the guy blowing leaves, like that scene, if you guys can talk about that. But all of it, so like, it's not like they're three-dimensional characters per se, but they sort of orbit around his world.
I will say the ex-girlfriend is very three-dimensional, not because but the implications surrounding her.
All right.
Because you understand a lot of her story, not through Bill's narrator, but through, in a way, like the events that led up to it, and how she's reacting to the thing. The mother is a very three-dimensional character. Again, not based on what she says or what she does, but because of the history is there. The uncle, less so, I would say. The father, you meet him for one scene,
sure.
and
it might
that
be
was
might be one of the most
heartbreaking
impactful scenes.
Yeah,
Sure,
heartbreaking
I guess
scene.
that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with all that. It's just odd. Like, it's hard to classify this, but I think at the end of the day, like I said, and combined with what you just said, that they fill out the world. They fill out Bill's world.
And also the giant fish that came out of his head. I mean, he had a lot of
It
personality.
might be a trout. He's not sure, but no, I guess
Possibly a trout.
Yeah, yeah, that's what he said. Yeah, I think it's enough there. Like, since he's so well rounded, they are to enough of a degree as well that I'll give them a 1. I know tradition is to pick out one. I think they all just combine to have a realistic feeling story, even though you're witnessing like stick figures essentially walk across the screen.
I do feel like every supporting character is an offshoot of him.
I would agree.
Yeah,
I don't think any of them really. Well, they don't, because everything's seen from his perspective.
right.
So no one has a life outside of him, even though they're implied to have lives outside of him. Of course,
the ex-girlfriend brings her current boyfriend there, and you see a scene where he says, again, it's all through Bill's point of view.
Sorry, I do have one. I just forgot about this. There's a part when he's in the hospital. He gets moved to, or he goes back into the hospital and gets put with in a room with a paralyzed boy, I believe.
Oh yeah,
who can only, like, basically Stephen Hawking style, can only, like, he has a couple of buttons that say like whatever he needs, but the narration says the one he pushes the most, it just says, "I am in pain." So, like, it's like that just happens, like, here and there, like, throughout, like, scenes in which he's talking to the other characters, like, that just is played in the background.
yeah.
So I'll give it a 1 for that. Even, like, it's an absurd joke. It's dark, absurd joke, but it's kind of the one I am going to gravitate towards.
Yeah.
So an extra layer there.
I mean, I think you're right, Ian. You were about to try to convince me more, but I don't think you have to. I think you're right. I think that these characters do have such a rich implied life, and they add so much to his story that they are really good supporting characters.
I think they definitely deserve a 1.
So that's ones all around?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm on to dialogue. Now, this is a tricky one because there's maybe 3 lines of dialogue through it.
All right, before you go into this, it depends on what you want to call dialogue, so go on.
Oh, yeah. So, if you look at it that way, the dialogue's really good because every piece of dialogue, one, the "how's up" is a fantastic piece of dialogue.
The how's up exchange.
Because that tells you everything you need to know about Bill's character. Then the scene between his father and Bill when neither of them know who the other is. He just has this name written on a piece of paper as he's losing
his. They should know each other, but they're not sure.
And then he goes visits his father. Left him, like, he met him once when he was young, and like it hasn't seen him. And they just watch TV together, and then he goes, like, "I forgive you," or
"You are forgiven."
Like, that is a heartbreaking moment. As if that's a one line of dialogue, but I count everything the narrator says as dialogue.
See, that's the thing about this question in this film, that is, and I would agree with that.
And it is fantastic written work. I laughed. I choked up. I mean, it's basically someone reading you a story almost.
Yeah.
And it works really, really well.
But here's what I would ask you. If someone was reading you a story, would you count all of that as the dialogue, or would you count the dialogue within the story as dialogue?
Well, that's, again, it's the nature of this film. Like, it's difficult to cut it up.
But this film is a read story. That's what it is.
Kind of.
Mean,
All right,
it's a story that's read to you.
In theory, they could remove the narration and you could just watch it as the cartoon plays out and have, like, the actual, like, without the narration, if you count dialogue as the written line. So "You Are Forgiven" shows up as, like, it's written into the panels. And there's, like, the trout thing. A couple of the lines are written in the panels. But without the narration, it loses so many layers.
Of course, but that doesn't make it
dialogue. Yeah, I understand, but I think
I'm not saying that this movie could go without the narration. I'm just saying that I'm not sure that it's. Right. I don't think it's dialogue.
I think because of it, I'm going to have to count it as dialogue. At least that's where I come down on it.
Okay.
Convince me otherwise, Steve.
Well, I think that it's a story that is read to you. That's what it is. If I'm being read a story, the dialogue are the parts in quotes. You know.
No, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying it's like...
And there are certainly parts that...
Yes.
Where the narrator says, and then Bill said this, or
traditionally
whatever.
That is true, but again, because of the weird nature, like the non-standard nature of this film, then it might change. At least
I'm just
I'm
confused
changing.
as to why a absurdist piece like this would change what you think is dialogue.
It's not even that. Like, I'm trying to think of other like more
All right,
concrete examples.
Let's change this to logs. So this is a monologue given to you.
It's not even a monologue. A monologue would be one character saying something.
Well, it's theoretically Bill speaking to you the entire time.
Well, no, you can look at it that way, but it's not necessarily true. It's a narrator.
In the
It's not even. I mean, there are stories where the main character just speaks to you the entire time, and this isn't that. It's a narrator. It's not somebody talking to you.
Yes,
It's
no,
a narrator
I understand
narrating
your point.
the story.
I'm just saying, like,
But I don't like. That's the whole thing. It's not. It's not. It's just not dialogue. I'm not saying it's bad or good or anything like that. I'm just saying it's not dialogue.
I think to me, I have to take it as such because it changes so much without it. Like, if not that, then what does it count as?
It doesn't matter. You don't have to count it as anything. It's narration. I don't know
we
why.
failed to account for narration.
Yeah, I don't know why. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is why
I'm counting it in this case.
it has to be dialogue in order for it to make the story what you want it to be. You know what I mean?
No.
Well, you're saying that because
that phrase. I don't know what you mean.
But what you just said is if it's not dialogue, then like I can't. I don't even know what I can't even rephrase what you just said. But like it was basically, I need this to be dialogue so that this story is what it is.
Yeah, kind of.
But why does it have to be dialogue? Why can't it just be narration? Or
I guess it doesn't have to be, but
it's a place. It's like the painting.
I guess it depends on how you wish to
I see what you're
analyze
asking.
this segment of the work, and I count spoken word, whether it is traditional dialogue between two characters. I count this section as spoken word. I think we had a debate on this for another
in the previous episode, sure.
episode, but I am going to count narration personally on how I assess this segment as part of the spoken word dialogue. I don't think it necessarily fits the strict definition of what dialogue is, or it doesn't actually, but I am broadening it for the meaning of spoken word.
Well, let me ask you this last question, and then I'll lay off of this. But if on MOTS, through MOTS, we also read short stories and longer stories sometimes, which this is a story that is read to us, basically. In one of those stories, if this didn't have pictures to it, if this didn't have video to it, and you just read this, what would you count as dialogue?
No,
would you count the entire thing as dialogue?
I understand your question. Yeah, it changes it, but again, because of the nature of this,
why, when going from
I know what
literature to
because this wouldn't be structured the same if it was a story. If
yes,
there was a,
I guarantee you could put that onto paper and it would play the same way.
You would be able to tell the difference between when the narrator's speaking and when the descriptions of the scene are.
It loses something in doing it that way, I would say.
Right. When people were talking, it would have quotes around it.
Yes.
It would say, and Bill said whatever, which happens a few times, and I count those parts as dialogue. Okay. Anyway, I don't think we're going to agree on this, so we might as well leave off.
I'm counting narration as dialogue, and I'm giving it all a 1.
All right,
in addition to the actual, in quotes, dialogue.
So, what do you think about then the dialogue?
The few lines of dialogue I thought were good.
Would it have benefited for more dialogue?
No, because I don't think it was that type of story. I don't think this story needed much dialogue.
Uh-huh.
In fact, I think even if those lines of dialogue weren't in it, it would have been just as good.
Okay.
That being said, I guess I'll give dialogue a 1 because I liked the 3 lines of dialogue.
Yes.
I wasn't arguing whether or not dialogue should have a 1. I was just arguing which parts of it were dialogue.
I know what you were arguing as.
You're arguing for your argument's sake.
No.
So, mostly onto style.
I really love the style of this. I really like the stick figure like style of drawing that Hertzfeldt does. Worked really well with this story, and the sections, like the backgrounds and the sections that he actually filmed, really worked for the mood of the story. I don't know. It just had this great flow to it throughout the entire thing.
I agree with that.
That really worked really well. I don't have too much more to say about style. I just liked it a lot.
No, I mean, so the thing is, again, if you're familiar with Hertzfeldt's style, like, you sort of know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And if you're not, like, I think this is going to sound like a backhand insult, but I do not intend it as such, but if it were like higher quality caliber animation, it would lose something. The simplistic nature of it, as you said, like somehow is conducive to the flow of it.
Yeah.
It would be more distracting, I think, if it were not stick figure-ish,
For
I
sure.
suppose.
And I think that the fact that
And the splicing ins of like the like actual like backgrounds of trees and parks and like the city that he had that sort of superimposed on the actual animation, like that worked perfectly.
By the way, when he sees that photo of the woman, was that his ex-girlfriend?
when
I
you
think it's
say
supposed
the
to be unclear.
photo,
You see an actual photo.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Of a
I
female
think it's
woman.
supposed to be unclear.
there is a section. You might not be talking about this, but there's a section of the film where there's video of a woman who's laying there, and then her eye opens.
Oh.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, I thought.
I think that's supposed to be his ex.
I think it's implied, but it
Yeah.
could be like unsure. Like that's how I take it.
But
like
yeah, they do a fun little splicing of, especially towards the end, reality and the animation.
starts
It's
to
very
bleed over.
Hertzfeldian, if that's a word.
It is now.
And the music actually it goes from very ambiance
Yeah.
and sounds of nature and city to these classical pieces, which I believe are famous, like Spring Awakens type, things like that, which work really well throughout. Like this is again, I mentioned the maturity level of Hertzfeld in this work, and it really shows. And he's very adept at crafting. He's a master of making art. He has a very distinct style. It might not be for everyone, as you mentioned, Scott, but he's adept at it.
I definitely agree. It is for me, and I loved it.
Absolutely. I really dug the style of this. I'm going to give that a 1.
And Scott, it's on to you for recommendation.
Yeah, so again, we often have like qualifiers and caveats, but I would say even if you're not a fan of animation in general, like animated shorts, etc., I think it's impactful enough. The message and the themes that we discussed can say something to anybody, even if you're like, oh, I'm just watching stick figures, but it's so much more in depth than that. I would say, yeah, go out and check it out, watch it. If you've never heard of Hertzfeld, see it. If you've only heard of or seen Rejected, see it. If you just want something pretty poignant but also like darkly hilarious, see it.
Yeah, this is not for everyone, and in a way, it's aimed at critics. But I absolutely adore this piece. I recommended it to watch. It's very touching, very brilliant. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll
sometimes do both, perhaps.
And sometimes
throw up.
the thing is, some people
From
might be
laughing and crying
turned
so much.
off by some of the more absurd sections.
Yeah.
But yeah, check it out. It's an hour long. Watch it.
I think there's something in here that anyone can dig into if they're willing to go into it with an open mind. I know there are people that wouldn't like this type of thing, but I think there's really important themes in here that are discussed and that are made clear. I would recommend it to pretty much anybody, and if you don't like it, go to hell.
Fuck you. More or less.
Okay, this is going to be a difficult one. I believe that we gave it all 9s.
And all for the same exact
Yes.
reasons. Yes.
And so overall, the score is 9. It's a tremendous piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a traditional piece, I would say, but it's definitely affecting something that, for our modern times, deserves to be seen.
All right, my name is Jonathan Ian Manzer. His spoon is too big, Stephen Hermosi.
Have a good night.
And his
And my anus is bleeding.
Scott
For the
Phillips.
love of God and all that is holy. Good night.
This has been Bon Mots. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Music by Chris Morgan.
Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow.
This has been a Lost Cinemas production. All rights reserved.